Hello and welcome to tutorial 177 in this series of tutorials and programs that focus on TradeStation EasyLanguage. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, then please go to markplex.com, that's markplex.com, and join the email list, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel or whichever video service you're watching this on. So today's tutorial we're going to be looking at finding consolidation on a chart, and having found it or found a measure of it, we're going to be adding some rectangles around the bars in which the consolidation is taking place. So let me just show you the two ways that we're going to be doing the calculation. Here is the program which we'll be going through in more detail in a moment, but let's just have a look at the calculation. Notice I'm using regions here just so we can get around a little more easily. So the first one is using standard deviation, which measures the dispersion of a data set relative to its mean. We're doing two things. We're calculating standard deviation using the standard TradeStation function, and then we're calculating a percentile of it using a couple of user inputs, the percentile val and the numbars. What that does is, for example, if we have this line here representing the standard deviation, then we have the percentile, which is this more green line, and you'll see that when it goes below, when the standard deviation goes below the percentile value, then we draw a box around the bars, and we go from the highest close to the lowest close during that period. And you'll notice that we've got two different boxes. So one of these represents the standard deviation going below the percentile of standard deviation. We also have another measure, and that is what I've called, or what I'm referring to as Consolidation Index. And the way that is calculated is we calculate the average true range, and then we take the highest of the true high over an average length, less subtract the lowest of the true low over an average length. And then having done that subtraction, then we divide it by the ATR. And again, we calculate the percentile, which I've called perc, cond, ind, and the same principle. So on the chart, we're plotting the standard deviation here. The green represents the consolidation index, and if we were to change our inputs to or rather if we just modify our program a little bit, we would see that the value of the consolidation index goes below the percentile for the box. So let's go into the program, and I'll just sort of talk you through most of it. So this is the calculation, which I think is relatively straightforward with the volume. We're also, in fact, if we just go to, got another chart here. If we go to a chart with the volume average applied, this is another indicator. What we have is that when the volume is below an average volume on the most recent bar in the box, then the color of the box will be made different. Now we've got four colors working here. So for example, for the standard deviation box, as you can see here, there are two choices in color. There's this one on the top left, and then there's the next one down, which is this more purple color, and that is to distinguish between a box that is not low volume or volume below the average, or boxes where the volume is below the average volume. And if it's below, then we change the color to be, in this case, a brighter color, but you can decide what color and what the transparency is using the user inputs. So the first thing that we do is we create some methods. In fact, we've got two methods for drawing the rectangles. And the first one is here. We're returning a rectangle, and we're drawing a rectangle using the following inputs. So for the start bar, integer, end bar, integer, double highest price, double lowest price, string border, and that represents the color, string fill, that represents the color that will be filled, integer weight, and integer transparency. Then we create some start or bn point, my start bn, my end bn, bn point.create. Now bn point is zero base, so what we have to do is to the bar number add the max bars back and then take away, subtract 1, and then that will be the same. That will refer to the number that we would normally refer to as the as start bn, and we do that for the start bn. The end bn, we create the rectangle, and then we alter the color attribute. So for the color, when we're just going straight to the color without applying any transparency, then we get that it's color dot from name and then the name of the color as a string. In terms of the fill color, we're also giving the option to have some transparency. For that, we use color dot from ARGB. That gives us a couple of inputs. The first one being the transparency, which is a value between 0 and 255, and the second one being the color, which is using the same syntax as we just had above. Fill pattern, the shading, the weight. Now we're setting this as persist because otherwise it will be applied to the chart and then disappear on the next tick. We don't want that, so we're saying persist, and we also don't want to extend it to the right, and then we're adding that to the chart. So that is the first method. The second one is, rather than using bn point, and let's just go back to the chart, with bn point, as new bars develop, this box will be anchored to these bars. It won't shift. But what I've done is created a little key, and the key needs to stay in exactly the same place on the chart as the chart develops, or as I go backwards and forwards through the chart. And the key is just to help you remember what colors apply to what situation. Even though these are user inputs, I think it's useful to see that there. So if we go to the second method, which I've called the key method, this is going to be using the XY point. So it's similar, except this time we're making method void, and we've called it draw color key with no inputs. And what we're doing is just creating the rectangle using XY points and changing the colors, the fill color, the color. This, incidentally, color, that is just the outline of the rectangle. And we are also creating a label using the syntax. And then we're adding the label and the key rectangle to the chart. And we're doing that for all 4 key boxes. And you'll also notice here we've got some variable key X and key Y, and that is because if this key is not in a suitable position as far as you're concerned, what you could do is go to Edit Studies and then change the position by modifying the number of pixels for key X and key Y. So let's just put in 200 and then say 600 and see what that gives us. And there you see that's moved it right down the chart. So that's probably not suitable for this particular chart, so what I'm going to do is just move that back to 0 and 0. Okay, good. So that they are the 2 methods. We've looked at the calculation. So where do we call the methods? Well, we do that in this area here, which I've called SD box and CI box. So what we do is we have to check if the standard deviation has gone below the percentile, and we also make a check to make sure that we're not starting a new rectangle more than once per bar. So I've set up a variable called rectThisBar, which is an intrabar persist, and that is set to true when a rectangle is created, and then at the end of the bar that's set to false. So just going down to the bottom of the program, the end of the bar, which we find out by bar status 1 is equal to 2, then we change that to false. So when we go below the percentile, we reset the highest close and lowest close. We flag that we've got a new cross being also an intrabar persist variable, and we capture the bar number. And then while the standard deviation is below the percentile standard deviation, we do several things. We update this value of HC and LC, the highest close and lowest close, for the bars. And then for a situation where we have not already created a rectangle for that particular bar, and we've just had a cross, then we create a rectangle, and we're doing that by calling the method that we've just looked at. The inputs being the bar num being the value that we've just set up here, the highest close, lowest close, and then the colors, border weight, and box transparency. And then having done that, we change new cross, which indicates the cross, to false, and rectThisBar to true. So we draw the rectangle when we first do the cross, but then ongoing what we do is we need to update the end point and the start point, and we do that with this syntax here. So we're saying if a rectangle exists, in other words it's not null, then we set the start point as bn point create bar num plus max bars back minus 1, then the highest close. Now you'll notice this bar num, this is also the value of bar num that was the bar number when the cross first occurred, when standard deviation dipped below the percentile standard deviation. So we just keep on extending the box and of course updating those values of the highest close and lowest close. What we also do is change the color. If volume is less than average volume, then we change the fill color and also potentially the transparency. That's based on user inputs. In terms of the CI box, it's very, very similar. In fact, almost identical. I just changed the names of some of the variables so that we can keep them separately, but that does exactly the same thing. So in terms of inputs, let's just have a look at the inputs. We have the 4 colors that we're using for the standard deviation box. I've said it's coral. For the Consolidation Index box, light green, and then we've got these other colors which are to do when we have low volume. Box shading, box transparency, and box transparency vol low, so we can control those two separately. Border weight, average length, num bars, and percentile value, which is point something, 0.1 in this case, and then the key X and the key Y that we've already looked at. So I hope this might be useful to you. I think there's some good information about drawing rectangles and a few other things, so please benefit from it. Please join the email list, and again please subscribe to this video. Thank you very much.